dulu Kak. What we want in the government theme is the implementations of Open-theism. This is the conditions in which the religious worshipping you do is not parameterized by other actors, be it in the social constructions or other religious stuff or source. What we want is that only a person and individual that is going to determine the values and the way they run their religious life, ladies and gentlemen. In our models, in our world, here's the thing that's going to be happen. Number one, we are not going to make any kinds of method in running religion become compulsory. We make all of it as the options, and it is all based on the rational calculations of person and poor and person individual. What kinds of things you can do, and what kinds of things that you are that you deem is something that's important and worth to be sacrificed. In Open-theism, also, we think that all of the societal judgment is going to be stripped away. So there are not going to be there will not be any parties who think that this person actor is less religious than others. All of concepts of that is going to be stripped in our world. The concept of religious imperfection, the concept of perfecting your religion through any kinds of fixed method is not going to be accessed. No parameters of which one is more religious than others. So in our things that I'm going to prove in my speech, why it will give much betterment to the lives of the poor. Ladies and gentlemen, let's try to characterize what kinds of problem that we have in status quo in regards to the poor. The poor is still become the groups of individual and the actors who are still striving that much to grant access for many things. They strive to grant access for happiness, including also religious component. They feel difficult to have a proper and decent clothes for attending religious ceremony, for example. They strive to get pure water, for example, to do a proper ablution before they go to Salat, for example, ladies and gentlemen. They strive to be able to fulfill their standards of happiness in all sectors, and men. We think that this is also happen in the terms of religion, in which they are also disadvantaged by the system of religion. So let's see how the system of religion can also harm the status quo. In the practices of religion, something that we cannot never deny is that the fact that there are still too many segregation in which you need to segregations of clusterizations of religious classes, in which to gain leverages upon that you need the capital to begin with. For example, number one, in all of religion, levels of your religion is still heavily measured by your comprehension upon specific details of religion, ladies and men. We think that this is something that is not good for them, because in regards to gaining more understanding in your religion stuff, you need to pay for education and pay the teacher to teach you that stuff, ladies and men. Even if they say that we still have Holy Bible, for example, other kinds of things, we think that all of that kinds of thing need more interpretation. In our scenario, in our current world, your ability to interpret that kinds of Bible is still is going to determine the levels of your religion. This is something that we think that is not good to begin with. In Islam, for example, the principles of higher classes and piety is going to be the concept of you're going to pilgrimage, for example, as an man. Going to pilgrimage, going to Hajj, for example, need numerous amounts of money, need a very strong physical capability, as a man. Moreover, the concept of marriage, for example, as the fulfillment of half of your religion is also burdening them that much. In a Christian also, you are demanded to have a glamorous Christmas party. In every kinds of Christmas celebrations, you are demanded by your religion to give present to other people, ladies and gentlemen. This is all of the things that's going to burden the impoverished society. Ngaben, for example, you need to pay much capital. You need to expend much capital to feed the people who are going to attend your religious ceremony. We think that all of these particular things are the things that's religiously very detrimental to the poor, ladies and gentlemen. But let's see how but let's try to characterize why all of these things is going to be very dangerous, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the thing. For religious entity, regardless your social status, you are going to be burdened by the religious fulfillment, ladies and gentlemen. What do we mean? Religious entity is going to feel suffer when they still haven't been able to run all aspects of their religion. We think that this is something that is not good, ladies and gentlemen, because what we understand is that the poor in status quo have been very disadvantaged by the system in which they cannot fulfill their physical happiness. They cannot buy the glamorous clothes to begin with. They cannot pay, they cannot feed all the people, they cannot pay zakat, for example. We don't want to burden them. What we want is that we are going to give the narrative that it is not okay for you, that it is okay for you for not being able to do that. Because in the principle of religion in the current status quo, is that there's always a narrative that if you don't pay zakat, you are not religious. What will happen is that when they are become poor, they will feel that being poor is something that is fair disadvantage for me, also even in the terms of religion, ladies and gentlemen. So what we want is that we don't want the case of religion gives the narrative that is not okay for you to be on that particular way, ladies and gentlemen. Because we believe that religious still feel suffer when they still haven't been able to run all speak religion. We understand the opposition may say that there is always other mechanism for poor to worship. For example, how the pilgrimage is not something that is that compulsory, for example, or how, for example, they say that in religion something that's very flexible. It accommodates any other parties. It accommodates entire parties in terms of fulfilling the religion. But something that we cannot deny is that they can still see other actors who are more religious in comparison to them. Because let's say, for example, that they are going to compare themselves as the one who has gone to the pilgrimage. They are going to feel less superior. They are going to feel that this is thing they still can compare themselves and still see that there's still less likely for me to be able to be highly religious, to be able to go to the heaven. It is something this is something that we think is going to be very bad to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. Moreover, ladies and gentlemen, in the narratives on religion, saying that this is also part of your religious dedication. In the current status quo, what we understand about the concept of religion is that the more you sacrifice yourself and the more you sacrifice what you have for the dedication of religion is going to be something that gives you more benefit in the afterlife. This is something that we think that is not good and that's very detrimental to the poor. Because to begin with, they even suffer to fulfill their basic necessity in life, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we say, that the narrative religion that this kinds of dedication to getting comprehend your religion fulfillment something that need to be stripped away to begin with, because something that can make them still suffer from such obligation. Then, so ladies and gentlemen, what we need to do is the open-theism, in which all parameters of being a flawless religious worshipper is going to be stripped away. So in our words, there are not going to be other practitioners who are deemed as more religious than others simply because they have gone to pilgrimage, simply because they have more money to the charity, for example. All of those concepts is going to be stripped away. No one is going to be feel superior in the terms of religion, as well as feeling more inferior in the terms of fulfilling the religious element. But let's try to characterize in the end why we think that the religious leader is going to be someone that is very important in our scenario. Ladies and gentlemen, what we need to understand is that in impoverished society, they don't have other religious options but to listen to the religious leaders. They don't have money to go to more research in regards to what is important and what is not important in religion. All of that needs kind of calculations and kind of research. We think that the impoverished society doesn't have interest to go to that, and impoverished society doesn't have capability to go to that, ladies and gentlemen. In religious leader, they are the one who are deemed as the ultimate actors who possess the most comprehensive understanding upon every kinds of details, even the very tiny details of any kinds of religion. What does that mean? It means that in the end of the day, they are going to be the most powerful actors who can shape how religion should be interpreted and how religion should be run. We think that this is the ultimate. This is the ultimate characterization that the religious leaders have. Something that doesn't belong to any other parties in the terms of religion. So what we have proved to you in this debate, number one, we have proven to you how the current mechanisms of religion is something that is going to harm the poor so much. That's to say that we need to open theism. But moreover, we believe that in the concept of religion, it should be able to accommodate all layers of society. In terms of religion, the concept of people who are more religious than others is something that is not good to begin with. It's very dangerous in religion. That's to say that we are proud to propose. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we concede that the government said that impoverished community are the people who has been faced struggle and such a systematic oppression in this life. Instead of they are poor, they are actually understand and realize that they are poor and need to improving themselves. But using this kinds of way, open-theism will never solve any kinds of problem that poverty face until in status quo, ladies and gentlemen. Clarifications. We say that this open-theism lead to make people perceive perception that God give you freedom to choose reciprocate His love yourself. That's why it leads to create a tendency that you will blame yourself at the end of the day, because you are as individual would rethink about what you did in the past, ladies and gentlemen. You blame all the action that you have been in the past. As the opposition, we don't want that you are the poor, that you also spend almost your time to blaming and questioning yourself. We would like to drive them to move on and continue their life with the status quo on how they perceive religions, ladies and gentlemen. So our stance as opposition, we would like to stay under status quo mechanism. As a religious leader, it's important to set the standard of religious practices as a guide for followers and for those kinds of impoverished community to improving themselves, ladies and gentlemen. 3 arguments in my speech. First is that why open-theism is not going to beneficial for the followers. Secondly, why the set of standard is really important. But thirdly, it significantly harm to impoverished community. And my second speaker would explain about how the idea of survivability of these kinds of impoverished community would not longer beneficial by using these kinds of open-theism at the end of the day. First, rebuttals to the leader of oppositions, right? They're trying to claim that the problem in the status quo, that poverty face a lot of problems, and we concede you upon that point. But ladies and gentlemen, first thing, you have to understand that religion is supposed to drive people about their faith, ladies and gentlemen. It's not only talk about how many materials that you got in your life, ladies and gentlemen. And also, if your problem about material things and physical things that you have to fulfill in your life, we say that government never explained to us then how in the side of the house using these kinds of open theism would actually solve their problem at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, they are trying to explain about how the poor are the one who get disadvantages by the teaching of these kinds of religions. Ladies and gentlemen, we say that no. We say that religion not give you any burden to begin with. But the most important thing, we say that religion is the one thing that you could use to become your coping mechanism at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, all the disadvantages that coming by the government side of the house, it's not only talk about the existence of religious practices. It's makes you harder to begin with, but also this is about the social constructive that happen in the status quo, ladies and gentlemen. All the standard that been set by the government, for example, or the society makes you even harder as impoverished community, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we say that as a religious leader, it's not strategic for you to using these kinds of open theism in order to solve the problem of poverty, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about what Uznul example, right? The concept of marriage. We say that the one who make it harder is not the religion's teachings, ladies and gentlemen. The one that who make it even harder is coming by the external factors, ladies and gentlemen, such as how uang panai is always getting higher and higher is because the social constructive that happen under the status quo, ladies and gentlemen. It's not about the religions that set you that you have to fulfill these kinds of things, but because even you go to mosque, for example, you could have those kinds of things at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Even if in our worst scenario it's harmful by you, in our worst scenario that these kinds of religion could be harm to the impoverished community, we say that it's even harmful in their side of the house, ladies and gentlemen, because it leads to make people irrational at the end of the day. That I will extend it to my case. First argument, why open-theism is not going to beneficial, especially for impoverished community. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to understand the goals of religious leaders, right? Instead of gaining followers, they also have to send the message from the Bible to their followers. We have to analyze that the goals of open-theism most likely open chance for every individual to blaming themselves even much bigger, ladies and gentlemen. But more than that, it's important to understand that the identity of the secret of the religions, especially that you as a religious leader, ladies and gentlemen. As a religious leader, it's also really important to maintain the secret of your own religions. In comparative, it's harmful in their side of the house because the tendency of every individual to having different interpretations would most likely create harms in your own religions, ladies and gentlemen. And I will further explain this why it's going to exclusively harmful for the impoverished community at the end of the day. That is why we say that it's not going going to benefit any kinds of followers at the end of the day. But secondly, why setting your standard in religion is really important, especially when you are as a religious leader, ladies and gentlemen. The reason why religion in Islam, for example, you have to conduct salat 5 times a day. In Christian, you have to go to church every week. It's because the rules that historically explained in the Bible and Quran that you cannot blame at the very first beginning. But secondly, you set your goals that you realize that there are other entity that's superior rather than yourself, ladies and gentlemen. It's really important for impoverished community, because in order for them to survive in their own life, they have to understand that there is the one that has been superior rather than themselves, ladies and gentlemen. And also, these kinds of standard lead into consistent pattern of behavior, ladies and gentlemen, which also impact you in spirituality and mentality. This shows you how these kinds of standard could be your guide when you are confused in the when you get confused in the moment of you get harder of life, ladies and gentlemen. It can be a guide when the leaders of religion, for example, unable to cater all the variety of different interpretation that might happen in the government side of the house. That is why we say that we want to avoid these kinds of things at the very first beginning, because we don't want to make these kinds of impoverished community get much more burden at the end of the day. Third argument, it significantly harm for the impoverished community. Ladies and gentlemen, impoverished community are the people who suffer in poverty, getting systematic oppression in economically and also mentality. Using these kinds of open-theism would lead to make these impoverished people most likely going to be irrational, ladies and gentlemen. Instead of less of economical capability, they are also uneducated, ladies and gentlemen. You cannot miss these kinds of characterization, because this is harmful when you using these kinds of open-theism, because you open the chance for them to rethink and reconstruct it about their own belief, ladies and gentlemen. We do not like that, because it leads to create a double burden to these kinds of poverty. There will be so many burden for impoverished community that unable to solve at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. They are hard to finding a job, for example. They are going to be irrational in every decision that they make, ladies and gentlemen. But also, it's going to detrimental into the process on how they survive in this rush of life, ladies and gentlemen, because they would most likely spend their time to internalize something that we shouldn't trade off at the very first beginning, ladies and gentlemen. So what we already proved to you in this debate, right? We already proved to you on how the importance of you keep the standard to these kinds of poverty to begin with in order to survive in this life, ladies and gentlemen, because these kinds of standards would become the guide for them in order to finding a better life, ladies and gentlemen. That is why in this community we also still remind to each other, ladies and gentlemen. We also make people try to teach themselves with the other self, ladies and gentlemen, especially with impoverished community that they are uneducated, and that's why we think that open-theism is not strategic to begin with. That is why we're proud to oppose.
People in poor community always looking for value, always looking for peace in their life survival and how to way out of their problem. The religion is the only way where they can able to find those kinds of values and also those kinds of peace and way of their security. The standard then set by the opposition side of the house always disintegrated people from these kinds of feeling. Why? Because the moment when they are not reaching these kinds of standards, they will always try to compare themselves to the another followers. They always blame themselves is not good enough as their other followers. Because they are also not being privileged and also and so forth. They will feel not religious, and also they will, in the end of the day, they will think that God will not ever love me because I am poor, because I'm not in that privileged conditions. So that is why we think that it's better to define this reciprocate by ourselves, so people will not compare. They will try to understand that God completely love all of their followers, no matter how your condition is. God will always try to understand to us and always try to listen to all of the prayer that we send on to them. Before I'm going to my substantive response to opening to the oppositions, they say that this kinds of things will lead to the society that they will irrationally reconstructive the value inside of the religion, ladies and gentlemen. the first policies, they never try to understand what kinds of the irrationality that they means. They say that because this salat 5 times out had been defined by the historical, so you have to follow it. When you not follow it, it will be irrational. Two problem, because we think that it's okay, for example, for you to not follow the historical things inside of religions. Why? Because the historical itself also exists because of the certain problem, the certain condition that happened in the past, which we think that the condition that happened at the time have the very significant difference right now, ladies and gentlemen. And also, we don't think that why this kind of irrational thing will happen, because we think that if their example, for example, salat 5 times, there will not create any kinds of significant problem, because it's will less likely to be happen, because it's not taking too much time, and also taking too much capital, for example. Dismissive to the example that have been brought by Prime Minister, which already tried to explain if people that live in a water scarcity, that they're very hard to wudu, so that is why they feel okay to do tayammum, for example, and so on and so forth, ladies and gentlemen. In my substantive, I'm going to bring two major points of argument. First, why these kinds of poor people that coming from poor community will still have the good interpretation and also trying to good exercise in their religions. Second of all, how in a poor community it can create a better prosperity for you in your future lives. Ladies and gentlemen, let's see what characterizations also in happen, why people insecure in reciprocate. People will always try to avoid because their salat is not that Hushu, for example, God will not accept his salat, your donation is less, and also you're not less information of your religions, you don't have enough food for a ngaben ceremony in Bali, for example, and also, for example, you don't have that proper dress in your Christmas party, ladies and gentlemen. The conclusion is, we believe that based on that kinds of things, it disintegrated people to love and also to survive their religion's value, ladies and gentlemen. The solvency that exists in status quo is that people will try to go to join in community or join to organization that bring the manner of religions, which we say that follow the certain group that is dangerous. But we think that this is something that harms to validate their action, for example, because these kinds of group in the religions also have a tendency to have the political interest. So that is why we see that in the current status quo also people are really reluctant to join in ISIS, for example. So that is why we think that instead of having this symbolic group with the symbolic group on how you validate your religious exercise, we think that it is better for you to focus on your personal activity that you want to pursue for your religion, ladies and gentlemen. Because we believe that your religion is about your personal bonding with your God. That is more genuine rather than if you join in a certain group or community, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why on how people will try to interpret well, ladies and gentlemen. They will try to find a more suitable way, that more accessible for them, that can still in line and relevant with their unideal condition, ladies and gentlemen. For example, like when you are coming from the hard worker, from the hard class worker like or slavery, for example, you will your time to exercise your religion will very minimum. You only, for example, not have enough time to hatam one Al-Quran in Ramadan time, and also you will not attend the Tarawih, for example. They will disintegrate you by people who have enough time to exercise those activities. Two reasons. First, because of your personal feeling that feel not able to do so. Second of all, the people judgment that see, oh, you're not doing the Tarawih, so you're not that religious. You are too focused to dedicate yourself for your dunyawi activity, for example. So that is why we think that it is better for them to interpret it by themselves, because in their condition also, which not ideal, they are being forced with the condition. They have to find the additional time for looking for money because they are poor, ladies and gentlemen. And also, for example, in Christians, that you cannot attend church in Sunday because you have to seek capital that only exists in opportunity in Sunday, for example. So that is why we think that the rationality will still exist in there, because people will try still to exercise their religions, at the same time also balance it with your daily activity, your dunyawi activity, ladies and gentlemen. Second argument, which talking about how this it will bring you to a better prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, let's see what the problem that limit people to gain their better life. Ladies and gentlemen, let's say in Hinduism that exists the level of kasta, that the region and the rich people and also the poor people. Ladies and gentlemen, they are labeled in the society. So this is why it causes the society feel less of incentivized to looking for more better opportunity, because they feel like this condition is something that already become determination for your life, for example. So that is why we think that without these kinds of things, open-theism will teach people on how to become more open-minded, that this label is not exist to all the people. So that is why people will not try to think that there is people that have a privilege in a certain religion, ladies and gentlemen, because we see that also in a village, for example, like ustads and also kiai, they got the additional harvest from the people when they in their harvest day, for example, because they feel respected to you and so on and so forth. We consider respected is something that okay, but actually without this open theism, people are less incentivized to giving their additional harvest to the people that more need it, for example, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why through these kinds of things, people will try to be more motivated. They will not be limited by these kinds of perspective. People have a more free will way of mindset. So that is why we believe that these kinds of open theism need to teach to these people. Thank you.
Panels, the most important thing in this debate is to prove and characterize what is the types of safety net to make impoverished communities survive. First, government already failed to prove it because they cannot characterize to us what is the most important needs of those particular poor people and why the construction of religion that force people to opt in to those materialistic lifestyles is make them survive at the very first beginning. In our side, Neny has been taught to you that in order for you to survive as a religious individual is to having a spiritual experiences to God, to consider that this particular life is a test by the God and you should go into it. No material fulfillment that these particular impoverished people need, and thus governments of the house should explain to us why it is important in the first place. Second, they also cannot explain to us what is the strategic approach by the religious leader to opt in to or to go to the impoverished community, and they cannot also explain how it will benefit the congregation by saying that you can have an open theism as the most as your approach to those particular individual. Thus, we will prove to you why it is beneficial to the congregation, especially when you are saying that open theism is bad. Responses towards the government argument: they claim that without having the open theism narrative, that it will creating more radical community. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a true false of this particular premise, because when you are opt into open theism means you are giving a free interpretation to those particular people. The reason why ISIS get more radical and more radical because they are considered that they are being poor. It is the fault of the government. It is not the fault of the God, or it is not the reason of God being having a test to you and you should going into your condition that you are being poor, for example. It is applicable to all cases or the reason why you are being poor, because the God exists in this world to test the individual whether or not they can survive with those particular conditions, because they want to giving in the reward inside of the Jannah, for example. That's why this rebuttal become important. But another rebuttal would be intertwined in my particular substantive. Two arguments. First, why the hope or why the particular rejections of those particular narrative is feasible to increasing people's survivability. Second of all, why it will adding more leverage to the congregation. First of all, I'm going to extend my my LO's case by saying that this is a task mindset that is very important to be upholded when you are approaching impoverished community. You should say that God put you in this world not to gain or achieve maximum financial or material status, but to gain spiritual means and manifest it to the practices of worshiping God. That is why it called test. You are okay to suffer because you are granted heaven when you are past it, ladies and gentlemen. The problem with open theism is you let the impoverished people to open the interpretation, especially claiming that you are become poor because of the government oppression, because it is your inherent birth lottery that is not existed by God, but it is the fault of something that you cannot characterize in, not because the decision and not because of God's decision, and it is the way for God to give you a salvation in Jannah, for example. What are the harm of this particular analysis? First, you are directly think that it is the fault of yourself. You are irrationally think that it is the fault of yourself because you are not struggle to achieve your maximum benefit, especially when it comes to opt into religious practices, ladies and gentlemen. This analysis is important because they don't have a spiritual safety net and think that it is not okay to be poor. Meanwhile, as long as these particular people can live peacefully, we as the religious leaders can say it is okay for you to live in that conditions. Problem in their side, no spiritual safety net, no goal as a human, especially when the impoverished community cannot get moral compass to aware in which standard that they want to undergo, ladies and gentlemen, because they are poor. They cannot analyze that whether or not they want to live as a socialist, they want to live as a liberalist, for example, because they are poor, they cannot have access. That's the easiest access for them to opt in is through the particular religion. Thus, it will get the spiritual safety net to those particular people. Second analysis of this argument. Rejecting preaching open-theism still gives a material survivability to the impoverished people. Here's the analysis. Same interpretation means they are collectively believe that there are economic hierarchy in religion. But in this case, the acknowledgement of hierarchy or class is not in the sense of harming poor people. But in our side, it is considered that they should help as the religious people, they should help people below of their particular classes. The fact that the religious congregation or mosque or church or any religious places actively gives poor people food or material support in the name of religion. They claim that helping people in impoverished, it is good because it is in the means of granting heaven, for example. It is a holy cause for you to doing good to the people because you have a same interpretation on how you should go in or undergo your religion. In their side, because they have a free interpretation on how they want to accept religion, they don't expect or they don't give or they don't live with the narrative that they can be survived anyway, because they are live in the conditions when they are poor, no one can help him. People are crazily individual and so on and so forth. The reason why it is more survivable, it is more survivable. Can happening in our side. But second of all, why it can give more leverage to the congregations. Ladies and gentlemen, as the religious leader, you should not say that your existence as a religion or your existence as the religious leader is their enemy. Especially notice that the government is no longer friendly to you because they put you in a less privileged condition. Religious leader should not add their grievances and embrace them by saying that they are the part of religion and it is okay to be poor. What the religious leader can say? They can say that first, being poor is okay. It is proven effective to gain more followers because of three reasons. First, because it's sensitive to their condition that they are poor, that they need to be accepted by the whole community, especially by the religion. Second of all, the poor people just don't have to do nothing. They just have to sit and give the spiritual preacher that it is okay to be poor, for example. Third of all, they see benefit from it. What are the benefits? It is going to my second analysis. Because inherently in religion, there are lots of affirmative action that can directly give to you. What does the affirmative action that inherently religion give? First, there is no obligation in Islam for you to pay zakat or kurban if you are poor. There is no obligation for you to go pilgrimage, for example, if you are poor, for example. But second, your prayer inherently is most likely to be accepted by God if you are poor. This is the most inherent benefit that you will get if you are poor. Just saying to God that I want A and I want B, maybe God will accept you. This is a very sweet narrative if you want to increase the number of your followers or the numbers of members on your congregation. Because it's proven effective because you are sugarcoating them by saying that it is good to be poor, it is okay to live your life like that, and etc. Worst scenario, they may claim that people lose trust to the religious congregation if they are continuously waiting and no one can give them a succeed, for example. We say no, first, if this particular method of preaching is successful, that is not their main cause or main goal of their life. Their goal of their life is to gaining more spiritual experiences by God. Thus, secondly, if they want to claim that yes, they still need material things, there's we say that it is still a main support from the religious congregation. They still can live anyway. But the third of all, it is more worse in their side because no alternative. They still poor. They cannot fulfill their basic needs. They should explain to us why it is better to live in their condition. Thank you.
In my way of speech, I'm going to talk about three issues. The first one is poverty and its relation to open-theism. What is the correlation and which sides that will profit better? Secondly, is I'm going to talk about symbolic practices as a result of classic religion that they are defending versus a genuine worshipping model that think as a result of open-theism that we are defending in our seventh house. Last issues we're talking about, because this debate should not happen in vacuum, right? We should talk about the alternative reality. If there is no open-theism, what will the world that will look like on that side of the house? A very basic and very core question has been introduced since Uznul's speech but never been responded until the last speaker from opposition. But before that, I'm going to debunk one idea that I think that less relevant and should not be counted in this debate till the end, which is Neny's premise about the role of religious leader of not only gaining more follower but also sharing and sending the message of religion as how it's written in the Bible or any other holy book like Quran, etc. Right? First question, there is no explanation why is it a must and why it will be leading to a good impact to the people who live in a very poverty condition, right? So that is the very basic question that if they want to bring up that cases, they need to answer that. But then there is no explanation from that. Therefore, I think that religious leaders' role is as simple as following the dynamic of condition in which they are living and seeking the best solution for the people that they are facing. So as long as we can prove that the option of religious leader that we are taking in government team will lead to a better life of these individual who suffer for poverty for so long time, that's a better role fulfillment. That's the point, right? So move on to the first issue about poverty and its correlation to what open-theism. So this is something that the leader of opposition bring up toward this debate. Their premise is about open-theism does not solve poverty. First of all, we think this is slightly miss out the framing of this debate, because since Uznul's speech we told you that understanding that these people live in a poverty condition, they have no access to many or various form of happiness, they cannot access education, like any other glamorous things that other society can get. The basic question then into the life of these people is that what is the minimum value that you can get as a poor people if you cannot access all those things? We give you an answer that you should create them a model of a simple religious worship that more genuine so that they can have value on their life. So basically, it's not our burden to prove you how open-theism will solve poverty, right? But eventually we will bite the bullet. But here's the second thing. In the other side, you need to notice that they themselves are not able to prove why then the classic model of religion is a better solution to solve poverty. Because what happened in a status quo is that everyone practicing, or not, if not everyone, is that most of the people practicing this classic model of religion. And what does it result to? Poverty, right? So that is the basic question that they need to answer to come up to this debate. Now let's us bite the bullet that they give to this debate. Farid respond this dynamic by saying that the existing religions like Hinduism with its social strata or classes, like Islam with such higher demand of complex practices and etc., sometimes lead the people to not being productive and suffer into longer poverty. I will extend these cases by give you three reasons why then open-theism would be a better solution to move on from poverty. Number one, because open-theism, so first what open-theism give you, right? A freedom of thinking and a freedom of realizing your relation with God. So what it will result to? One, you will have a more effective resource allocation. Instead of using your 100 million, or no, if you are poor, you will not have 100 million. If you have like 15 million, instead of using that go to Hajj, then maybe you will use this 15 million for a more productive things. You will open entrepreneurship, you will like sending out your children to a better school so that they can have a better future, right? So there will be a more effective budget allocation in our side of the house, and that is a result of you freely thinking and not constraining by the standard of classic religion that exists in that side of the house. The second reason is that you will have a more productive mindset to begin with, because in our side of the house, because the relation of you as an individual and God becomes more personal, you are thinking more about yourself, not only about getting the label of a religious people in the eyes of society, but what you are thinking is that how will I realize it for me to my God, and at the same time gaining value in my life. So you will have a more productive mindset. Lastly is that because open-theism give you more value, it gives you more a stable condition, and because you have more stable condition, you will have a better starting point to then look up what should I do next, and etc. and etc. So those are important things that you need to notice. Opposition claim that there is a social construction influence the decision of individual to practice their religious teaching. We agree on that, but exactly that's where open-theism becomes necessary. If you go to open-theism, you will have more flexibility and ability to criticize the social construction that take place into your religious influence, right? So we think if you want to change social construction, exactly you need open-theism. If you stay on a classic religion that has been accommodated and has been accompanied by social construction, then you will not move on. That is exactly the conclusion. B is about symbolic practices versus genuine worshipping, right? They say that religious give you no burden. They say that instead a classic religion could be a coping mechanism. First, Neni told you about 5 times of salat a day is very easy, go once a week to church is very easy, etc. Yes, because you are cherry picking the example that we have told you since Uznul's speech, right? We told you much more complex examples about the detail of purity in every single teaching, the impacts of everything, etc. So there are lots of complexity that has been dismissive on the side of the house. The conclusion is that if it's so complex and so demanding and require lots of capital, etc., how could a classic religion give you no burden, and how could it become a coping mechanism? It could be a coping mechanism only if you can fulfill everything that is demanded by that kind of thing. If you eventually ended up of not qualified for doing those things, instead of being a coping mechanism, that will be instead a pressure to you, it will be a judgment and etc. So that's a bad thing, right? The more important question is that how will they make a decision, right, after they opt into open-theism? Because the basic premise in opposition case is that they will make irrational decision. First, what is irrational and what is rational in that side of the house? That's very unclear. What do you mean by that? Then lately, I noticed that, maybe this is what Haykal means. Haykal say that ISIS understanding that the poor condition they had in the past probably due to government failure instead of God failure. Then that's a better perspective. Instead of blaming God, which you cannot criticize and you cannot move on from that, it's better to criticize government, so you can have a better option to then have a changes. If you start to blame God, then what will you do on yourself? The house succumb to the life, and then you accept the deprivation of life that you already given, etc. Because you cannot attack God, right, and etc. So we think that's a better perspective. But here's the most important thing: we think people will not make irrational decision. People will make a good decision that's suitable for themselves. Why? Although you have a no high education, you can still make a good and suitable action. Why? Because in open-theism, there is a freedom and no fear, meaning that people easier to organize what they want to do. You do it genuinely without hesitation and question, right? In otherwise, exactly things that are complex in that sort of house, exactly the things that requires education. So if you are asking about which states that require more education, their side require more education. We think some people in worst case scenario might be not able to create a good decision because they will confuse. But this is still good, right? It's not like there will be no moral compass like Haykal told you. What will be missing in our side of the house is a fixed religious regulation. It's not like there will be no moral compass, right? We think people will still have moral compass, and eventually they will create a better situation where people can come up to the decision.
Government forget that if you want to talk about the spiritual closeness of us to our God, it's not about you can interpret or you can determine whatever you want to do inside of your religious practices, ladies and gentlemen. It's about the sacredness of the religion. It's about the determination inside of your religion and how it is being said that this is what you should do, and that is why God is so precious, God is so holy, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why a set of standard is very important to maintain the sacredness of this religion, and the sacredness of religion is the only thing that people will look into, and the only thing that people will consider whether or not they are spiritual enough, whether or not they have the spiritual satisfaction or not, ladies and gentlemen. If you open interpretations, means people will have their own standardization of how they would like to worship the God. If that is so, means people will feel that they are superior because they have more better interpretation of the interpretation of how they should worship the God, because they think that this is the best way I can do it, and it's no longer upon what God told you, but it's upon what you want God to see you, ladies and gentlemen. So that's not the conception of religion, and that's not the thing that will make religion holy and sacred in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. We also concede that this is not about the case of making people do not poor anymore or not, ladies and gentlemen, but inside of our house, in status quo, it is proven that at least when you are in an impoverished community, religion standard and how you see that the religion is so sacred and you want to follow the God until the end of your life is the only safety net that you have when government cannot be able to help you in the end of the day, when welfare and your kinds of material things cannot be able to accompany you in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why it's so important to have the moral compass, like how Haykal already said. When you have the open interpretation, it's not only that you will interpret it on yourself, but when you think that you are not spiritual enough, or when you think you do not succeed in achieving what you want, when you already can focus to the level, to the low standard of religious teaching that you want, it's not only you will only blaming yourself, ladies and gentlemen, because you think that it's your fault that you cannot be able to set a standard that is equal or that is suitable for you. You will only blame yourself in the end of the day, and that is bad, because this is not what God wants. What God wants is that you practice whatever you want on the set standard that God's already told you, and you cannot complain to God because God is so sacred. So you have to just keep on practicing the belief, ladies and gentlemen, because the safety net is always on God. The safety net is always on the afterlife that you have in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why the ending qualification that you also demand is only on the God perspective, and you can never know it, ladies and gentlemen. So the things that they say about like material things, etc., it's already told you that it's about the social construction. It's not have relation upon the religious teaching in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll put you inside of my clashes, right? So first upon the how to get the spiritual classes to the creature, to our creature, right? They told you that religion in status quo demands so many things, like you have to have a good understanding to get the money, to get the education, the marriage, the Christmas party, etc., etc., ladies and gentlemen. We told you that this is not happening, right? Because in religious teaching, we have so many way of practices of how you want to worship God. It's not that you're going to Hajj, for example. It's not only you on like you are praying, ladies and gentlemen. It's not only on zakat. There are so many things, ladies and gentlemen, and we told you when you want to understand the worship or the practices inside of status quo, it's not that you have a high, it's not that you can only understand it when you have a high education, ladies and gentlemen. You can read the Quran. Quran have so many translations, ladies and gentlemen, that you can understand it, or you can just hear the preaching inside of your community, for example, inside of the mosque, inside of the church, ladies and gentlemen. So inside of religion, the main conception is that the sacredcy is on the God. God has the qualification. You should not standardize it, and you should not compare yourself to others, because it's not you who is to compare, but God. So this is the most important thing that we have to understand, because if you believe that it's on the God, you will not ending up comparing yourself to each other. So the happiness inside of religion is very simple. So the problem that comes from government side of the house is on the social construction that they never engage to our point, ladies and gentlemen. We told you that about Christmas party, about you having education, it's only individual ego to be seen more superior than others, ladies and gentlemen. And this is not the teaching of religious teaching to begin with. It's about individuality who wants to be look more superior, who wants to be look more religious upon each other, ladies and gentlemen. This is not the teachings of religious belief, because what they told you is that materialism is not the important thing inside of our world, but how you worship the God, and your ketakwaan is only on the qualification of God, ladies and gentlemen. We told you that marriage is expensive. It's not because of religious teaching. In Islam, it's very, very simple, ladies and gentlemen. You just have to have the two witnesses, for example. You are man and you are a girl, ladies and gentlemen. But inside of our society, it's about the culture of you, like for example, inviting other people to go to your party, and you have so many good foods and etc. It's about the culture. It's not about the religion. If you really believe on the religious teachings, then you will think that it's so very simple. The happiness is simple, and it's not about you comparing to each other, ladies and gentlemen. But even if it is about comparing each other, but the poor compare themselves to each other, we think the poor is not that imprudent to always compare themselves to things that they cannot have inside of status quo, ladies and gentlemen. Because the poor are also exposed to status quo differences about the class, about the different economic capability, for example, and etc. They know that the rich are privileged enough to get that kind of money, and they have to succumb towards status quo. The government cannot be able to help, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why we believe that the comparison isn't on the because of religious teachings, but comparison the comparison that they do and the unhappiness that they do is because of the social construction and the failure of government system cannot be able to help them in the end of the day. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, what religious teaching, which is very classical inside of our house, is very important. The most ideal thing is because Neny's argument become important in this point, right? The sacredness of religion is because it is a set given by God, order in which the entity is so holy that you cannot against him. The fact in impoverished community is that because it is holy, the conception in which the God is more superior should not be compared to another people who have more superiority inside of the material things, inside of their spiritual happiness, ladies and gentlemen. But even if it is true that religion demands so many things and it needs material things, it is not right to preach it in impoverished community, because if the purpose is to feel spirituality towards your God, means you have to make them believe on one strong conception of God is the only thing should be superior, ladies and gentlemen. Poor people are less educated. They cannot rationalize whether what they have done is spiritual enough, because no standard. That's why Haykal's argument is very important, because in poor community you need moral compass. You need something that will be your safety net, and that will be your moral compass to what extent that is spiritual, ladies and gentlemen. Not on by or yourself, because you cannot feel the spiritual happiness itself, because you will always compare to other people who, for example, can go to Hajj, who, for example, if they interpreted that the most spiritual thing that they have to do is to going to Hajj, ladies and gentlemen. So you will still compare in the end of the day. But in our side of classical religion, there are so many ways, and there is already a conception to which suitable or to which suitable extent of religious teaching that you can afford inside of your life in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why the spiritual classes will happen inside of our side, and it's easier for poor people. But let's engage towards the case about poor people cannot work and poor people cannot be able to balance the work time and the exercise of religious teaching, going to church, for example. We told you inside school, people are already that tolerant towards religious teachings and towards people who are very, very religious. They are okay for people to going to church on Sunday. It's international free day, ladies and gentlemen. It's also the conception, and people believe that it's okay for you to go into church and you trade off your work, because that's the most important thing inside of their house, ladies and gentlemen. For example, if one people practice to go into church on Sunday instead of their potential money, ladies and gentlemen, people will not see it as something that is okay, because the people have many different interpretations, and that people who think that it's not okay may not have the same interpretation that going to church on Sunday and trade off your potential money is something that is okay, ladies and gentlemen. So because there's different interpretation, people will have different tolerance level inside of status quo, and judgment. That is not okay, because you will not be tolerated into something that is very, very holy instead of the conception of religion and stuff. If we have the rigid conception, people will also agree. We will have the conception that this is the most important thing, which is going to church on Sunday, ladies and gentlemen. So we believe that their side will not win. Thank you.
Government fail on this debate, right? Because they are become so pragmatic that think that religions makes you become a poor. In our side, we do not want to use this kinds of perspective to using this kinds of open-theism as the enemy to our religion, ladies and gentlemen. We don't want make religion is becoming our enemy, to standardize that our life is becoming fail because it's set by our religion, ladies and gentlemen. It's really harmful in their side of the house, right? So the classes here, which way that create a better quality of life for impoverished community at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. So the problem in the government side of the house, all the hard circumstances that they have been mentioned, the poverty phase right now exists because the religion that push you to sacrifice and bothering your life to begin with. Ladies and gentlemen, we already explained to you that exactly you cannot blame religion's teachings, because it's about the personal choice. That what Kavira already emphasized to you before, right? But it's also coming by the social constructive that happened until right now, ladies and gentlemen. And none of the government side of the house tried to engage to this kinds of point, ladies and gentlemen. And also we say that opposition win at this point, right? Because we the only team that responds to the government that say that exactly you cannot blame your own belief, your own faith, because it's something that you could put your effort at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. And also, governments try to explain that exactly this open-theism is important to open the criticism. Ladies and gentlemen, Kavira already responded to these cases. It also could lead into bad interpretations, ladies and gentlemen, that makes people irrational at the end of the day. And they try to explain that we couldn't understand what is rational and irrational in our side. We already explained to you before that exactly the way that how the poverty would making a decision in their side of the house would most likely be irrational, because in their side they always might think that all the things that exist in status quo is coming by my sacrifices, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we do not like that, because you also have to realize on how the social constructive that happen in the status quo is really severe to influence the life of the people, ladies and gentlemen. And also the argument by the all government side of the house that say that all the disadvantages by these kinds of impoverished community could solve by using these kinds of open-theism, ladies and gentlemen, because they said that these kinds of strategy at least give the minimum value of life. Ladies and gentlemen, opposition side already respond to these cases. We say that our goals as opposition, we do not say that we are going to solve these kinds of poverty issue directly, but at least in our side, we provide you a better safety net to impoverished community, ladies and gentlemen. At least they are having such a coping mechanism on how they have to face their own life, ladies and gentlemen. Their case about it's going to create a better interpretations. Exactly, the opposition side already proved the correlations between religion and poverty, means that it could be your coping mechanism, ladies and gentlemen, but also it could be a moral compass, that what Haykal already told you, right? And also, don't make the government champion this debate, because they make impoverished community have to rely to themselves, ladies and gentlemen. They have to pretend that themselves is that superior in their own incapability, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why we say that our side win on the likelihood on how these kinds of impoverished community would stand in their life, ladies and gentlemen. In government, they rely in their own mind and their own perspective about life that they are the one who are right, ladies and gentlemen. It's dismissive to in our side. We already told you that the standard of the moral or the moral compass is really important when you are getting confused in life, ladies and gentlemen. That is why the likelihood is better in our side. We see these kinds of hard circumstances. It's not the only it's not only even harder because of religions, but also there is another factors that you have to also engage at the very first beginning. That is why vote for the opposition.
Problem in religion that exists is that to escalate your religious value is not inclusively approachable to all the followers. That never explained by opposition side of the house on how in their side without this open-theism, that poor people can be catered on how their mechanism is enough to follow the classic model of the religions, ladies and gentlemen. They never try to understand if people have the complex background, have the complex condition in their life, ladies and gentlemen, on how they can be as equal as people that have no significant problem to follow all the classic model of their religion itself, ladies and gentlemen. Then there is missive to our point that there's existing of the society that people that live in a water scarcity condition, for example, they're very hard, they're very expensive to get water. The people that very have less time to exercise their normal life because they are forcing to become the hard class worker, for example. So that is, for example, they say that there is existing zakat and so on and so forth, but we think that is something that is still will still disintegrate people, because as the zakat receiver, you will not get the significant pahala, for example, pahala, because you only become the receiver. That's so there is the moment when you become the recipient of this pahala itself will make you more disintegrated even more, because you will think that you will suffer even more everlasting, ladies and gentlemen. And also they say in terms of open-theism itself, whether or not it will helpful towards to the poor people, to the poor community or not. Ladies and gentlemen, our side had already tried to explain that open-theism can create a better personal life of mindset that there will be no any kinds of boundaries, that you only have to follow these kinds of standards, for example, as your moral standards, because we think that these kinds and second of all, you will have the better human resource of allocation in capital, for example. Ladies and gentlemen, we think that in their side the open-theism is not helpful, because the religion that exists that provide you the moral compass had already enough. But we say that the moral compass that they had already tried to explain had already giving double standard for these people. They have to follow the standard. Second of all, they have to fulfill their their primary needs, ladies and gentlemen, which we think that it is something that had already explained by my first and my teams, that it is something that hard to achieve that kinds of two points, ladies and gentlemen. And also in the points of reconstructive that they say, ladies and gentlemen, they say that when we let people to open-theism, we let people to reconstructive the religion that makes them feel superior. But ladies and gentlemen, we think that we will not going to embrace all people to having this open-theism, ladies and gentlemen. We want the people to be adaptive with their religion and also their personal life. Even if in a worst case, for example, there will be the constructive happen, and people will follow the majority, ladies and gentlemen, and to criticize the social life standards, for example. We think that the open-theism is needed to criticize these kinds of social standards that coming from the religious field itself, because without this open-theism, without this open-theism, people will be everlasting, unstoppable, will be trapped in that kinds of perspective, ladies and gentlemen. In our side, even if people will will follow the majority and also to follow the other people in around them, it's been explained by my team that it is still something that okay, because you will follow the majority that exists in your surrounding that also have the same problem with you. So that is why we think that this open-theism have no problem. Thank you.